Welcome to episode number 267, where I'm talking with Terra Rafael, midwife, Ayurvedic practitioner, and educator on women's health, about preparing your body for conception and pregnancy. We talk about the Ayurvedic view of infertility and what foods, herbs, oils, and therapies help to nourish the reproductive tissue, along with how to prepare your body for conception. So please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. This episode is sponsored by New World Ayurveda. If you're interested in working with client case studies from day one of your training, consider becoming an Ayurvedic practitioner through New World Ayurveda School. This way you learn the theory of Ayurveda at the same time as you learn how to apply it practically. Get a head start on working with clients by learning Ayurveda through being exposed to the most common problems clients face and how to correct them with diet, lifestyle, and herbs. The other interesting thing about New World Ayurveda is that you start learning pulse diagnosis from the very first day. They have had the most experience teaching Ayurveda online than any other Ayurveda school, and they have developed ways of teaching pulse diagnosis at a distance. And you get the chance to study Ayurveda with an MD through Ayurveda's premier online school, New World Ayurveda. For more information, go to newworldayurveda.com, and you'll also find that link in the show notes. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Terra Rafael, certified Ayurveda practitioner, and she has worked in women's health since 1981, first as a home birth midwife, then as an Ayurveda practitioner. She has also studied myabdominal therapy, end-of-life care, and shamanism. Terra's goal has been to serve women, body, mind, and soul. To this end, she has served hundreds of women in her wise womanhood practice, taught hundreds of women midwifery and Ayurveda for women's health, spoken at conferences, and written articles and books, including Ayurveda for the childbearing years. She currently teaches at Yoga Veda Institute and wisewomanhood.com, and she especially enjoys mentoring students and practitioners over Zoom. Terra, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Colette, for welcoming me into your podcast.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And you know, the timing of this subject, which we're going to talk about today, fertility and preparing your body for pregnancy, is perfect. Because Terra, I recently just published a couple of podcast episodes on the menstrual cycle. I've been doing like this little series on women's health. And just to remind the listeners, because they might be helpful to refer to today during our discussion, episode number 256, the menstrual cycle, the doshas and the gunas, and episode number 263, the Ayurvedic view on menstrual disorders. But as I said, our topic today is a perfect continuation of this series on women's reproductive health. And I guess, Terra, we need to set the foundation for our discussion. And if you could give us an explanation as what is infertility? We talk a lot about infertility, but what does that mean, please?
Well, the accepted definition is that couple has worked for a year, and I say work,
Right.
getting pregnant without any birth control, and they have not successfully achieved pregnancy. So there's a lot of aspects to that. It can concern the male and his fertility. It concerns the female and her fertility. But it's kind of a mechanical definition that doctors use. And as women get closer to the end of their childbearing years, they often will want women to start working sooner than a year of trying, just because there can be take a while to get things going.
Okay.
And so that kind of highlights one of the big things, especially for the more advanced woman, to consider when she wants to have a baby, that she should really look for at least a year of preparation to make sure that she's balanced in her whole body, that her partner has healthy sperm and everything is working there, and that her ovaries are well nourished. So it can be a process, as you talked about in your menstrual talks. Those are one of the big steps, is to make sure the menstrual cycle is working. So a lot of times we think about infertility and fertility, and it's kind of this vague thing like, oh, if you have a baby, you're fertile, and if you don't. But it actually is quite an amazing process to conceive a baby. And that when the eggs are developing right after the menstrual cycle, then estrogen is produced. And then as several eggs are also happening at once, it's not like one egg each time. There's several. And then the one that becomes the most advanced will be the one that ovulates. And so the estrogen is being produced by those eggs, and then the egg that pops out leaves behind this husk, this follicle, that is what actually helps maintain the pregnancy until the placenta can work and produce all the hormones. So this corpus luteum is what it's called, is very important to pregnancy, because sometimes it can happen that women actually conceive, but they don't maintain it, that either it doesn't implant properly, or the lining isn't proper, or they don't maintain the lining long enough. So when I look at a case where we delve into it, like finding that cause, which is one of the bases in Ayurveda, to find where is the problem actually coming from. And so that's kind of important for women to understand. Another thing that we don't often talk about, but that is a fact, is that the ovaries are actually the little eggs we have at the beginning of our life. We have so many of them, millions of eggs. It's hard to believe how many eggs we have. And then what happens is they drop off as we grow up. And by puberty, we have thousands of eggs, like hundreds of thousands of eggs. But the eggs each month develop, but they develop for 3 months before that final development phase. Mm-hmm. So that whole process is a time when the egg can be made stronger. And so that is an important part of preparing. One reason why we want to say at least 3 months of the ovaries being nourished and protected. But first of all, as in Ayurveda, we talk traditionally that before conception, it's best for the parents to go through a regime of panchakarma, if at all possible. In my experience, most people will not find time in their life to do panchakarma, especially a lot of people they wait to the last minute and say, oh, I want to get pregnant next month. What should I do? That's a whole different situation. But, and I'm not sure if you've had a good talk about panchakarma that people could find out more about it already.
Yeah, I have discussed panchakarma. It's a deep cleansing ritual. There's 5 steps involved, and we definitely have discussed that in the past to really reset the system, nourish the system, rejuvenate the system. And yes, amazing. And I highly recommend always for people to, if they can, invest and take the time to do that. But I can particularly see in preconception stage will be a wonderful time to take advantage and invest in a panchakarma. But like you said, it's hard for people to find the time to go to an Ayurvedic clinic or the money sometimes to invest in a panchakarma.
Yes. So in that case, we will try our best to do some cleansing and rejuvenation as they're going through their normal life. But so first, we always want to work with digestion and make sure that the digestion of the whole body and all the tissues is good. And then if there's some repair that needs to be done there, of course, work on that. And then we want to look at the menstrual cycle, like you have already talked about. If the menstrual cycle is off, that means there's something not working right. The ovaries or the hormonal system, or even just the circulation that is what carries the hormones back and forth between the different glands. So working with that to get that in balance. And if panchakarma is possible, then doing that, or else evaluating, especially the liver, can be a very problematical thing, especially in the past if they were on a lot of drugs of any kind, or birth control pills are a common problem, that the liver does a lot of extra cleansing during pregnancy because it's cleansing for the baby and the mother. And so it's especially needs to be supported. And after that, of course, you would do any nourishing of the tissues that are weak or that need to be balanced by doshas if they haven't been already fully balanced by the panchakarma. So we would want, then would be when we would do the 3 months of rejuvenating the ovaries, because we've done the cleansing. And then that would be, we'd start the rejuvenation when we do the rejuvenation after panchakarma or after other measures to cleanse.
I'm jumping in here for a moment to let you know of some support. If you're looking for a cleanse and can't afford or take time out for a panchakarma, my at-home tailored Digestive Reset Cleanse is a great alternative. This cleanse is a holistic cleanse, and it comes with a 90-minute one-to-one online consultation with me so that I can tailor the recipes, the yoga, the pranayama, the meditation, the self-care practices to you and your lifestyle. This cleanse will not only help you to reset the digestive system, but will also help you to reset all the systems of the body and nourish the tissues. And it's also a great preconception cleanse. I do have a discounted group cleanse starting January 27th, 2023, and you can check that out on my website elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and you'll find the group discounted cleanse under events. If that date of January 27th doesn't work for you, you can do a private cleanse and choose your own dates. The structure of the cleanse is the same. Both come with a 90-minute consult, and you can find the private cleanse under programs. I'll also put that link in the show notes. So just to let you know that there is this online at-home alternative to a panchakarma. Okay, let's go back to my conversation with Terra.
And you can feed the ovaries with various herbs. The one that I use the most is Vidari, which is pretty neutral in terms of the doshas and feeds all the tissues. And you can also eat eggs, are nourishing for the reproductive. Milk is raw sugar, ghee, seeds and nuts are good, especially almonds and sesame seeds. So those are some of the kind of traditional and known ways to feed the reproductive tissues of the body. And those would work for both men and women. I'm focusing on the women here. That's just my tendency throughout my practice. So please excuse me, men, when you're listening. And I hope that you can find an expert on male reproduction to help you with that.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about the Vidari herb, please?
Yes, it's a nourishing herb. It feeds, and it's, like I said, it's fairly neutral, so it's safe to have. And I've used it a lot for people who are depleted in any of their tissues. And also, it works really good during pregnancy if a woman is depleted somehow. Or, for instance, one of the things I was just talking about in the pregnancy class I was teaching was, for instance, if the baby isn't growing well, or if the placenta isn't making a lot of amniotic fluid, that kind of tells me there's a need for more nourishment of the placental tissues. And so I would use it then. So then, of course, there may be known blockages of the fertility that are happening. It could be the ovaries, which we've been feeding, and there are other ways to nourish the ovaries and the reproductive tissues that are very simple. Those kinds of things to nourish the tissues of the reproduction include things like castor oil packs if there's blockage in the tubes, or if there's scar tissue in the area. Doing Maya abdominal therapy, which is a kind of massage technique from the Central American Mayan people. And you can also do just vaginal steams can be used to bring calm vata in the area, depending, and of course, you depend on what doshas are going on.
Exactly.
If you need to unblock, or if you need to warm, or so forth. There are other things to consider, like if we know there's some kind of hormonal imbalances, we might treat some of those. One of the more common ones is that the time between conception and when the next period would come is too short. So what happens is the egg might be fertilized, but it's swept away instead of planting into the uterus. So that is called a short luteal phase. And that has to do a lot of times with the ovary needing to be nourished. The mitochondria, or the kind of energy centers of the cell, the egg cell, need to be strengthened before conception so that the corpus luteum will be strong and last long enough to keep the pregnancy going.
Okay, and that was the one you talked about, how it's like the follicle that holds the egg until the placenta is formed and takes over.
Yeah, the follicle is in the actual ovary, and it pops open like a little balloon and lets the egg, the oocyte is the term, come out, and then it goes in the egg tubes or fallopian tubes, and travels down that tube, and that's usually where conception takes place if it happens.
So that again shows like depletion, really. That would be a depletion in the body when the mitochondria, the energy centers of the cell, are depleted in a way. So that's again on the path to depletion. Like you said, there can be many reasons or root causes, but in Ayurveda tells us it's often either a blockage or depletion, right?
Right. Yes, very much so. And then, of course, if there are any kinds of vaginal infections, those should be cleared up. It's hard to treat those during pregnancy because the things you use could be more harmful for a pregnant continuation. Mm. There can also be the mechanical blockages, like I've mentioned, such as scar tissue. That can happen if a woman has had a vaginal infection for a long time, and it can go up into the uterus and into the fallopian or egg tubes. And that can block the egg from coming through to the uterus or from the sperm getting to the egg. So that's an important reason why vaginal infections should not be ignored.
Exactly.
Really important to check it out if you think you might have one.
And you mentioned that the castor oil packs are great for that because the castor oil has this breaking up quality. So it breaks up scar tissue as well.
Yes, it does. It stimulates the, I think it's the macrophages or the part of the immune system that kind of eats up unneeded things.
Okay.
So the scar tissue can be broken down by that, but a lot of times it's good to do the massage also because that mechanical movement of the area helps with breaking up that scar tissue.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find is that many women don't really understand where their uterus is. And it's very simple. I actually have a video on how to find your uterus, or where is your uterus and your ovaries. Because a lot of women think it's kind of by their belly button. And that's partly because of the way the pictures are made of the uterus. They show the uterus kind of like, it looks like a moose with the fallopian tubes coming out the side. That is a picture of a uterus that has been taken out of a woman's body. It doesn't look that way in your body. In your body, the uterus is suspended over your bladder. So the uterus is like 1 or 2 fingers, usually, if it's in its best kind of physiological position. It's 1 or 2 fingers above your pubic bone, just above your bladder. And the ovaries, you can find them. I was taught this by one of my Ayurveda teachers, is if you make a triangle with your thumb and your pointer fingers, it's hard to describe, and you let your hands just go straight down and then put the thumbs in your belly button while you hold that position of your hands, and then where your little finger touches, that's about where your ovaries are inside of your abdomen.
Oh, very good. So if you're forming a line with your 2 thumbs across the top of the triangle, and then you bring your index fingers together, and that's pointing towards your pubic bone, and then the ovaries are where your little fingers are. Great.
Yes.
That's a good trick.
Yeah, and that takes into account kind of your body size and shape and things.
Right.
So it's very individualized that way. And anyway, so massaging, you don't want to massage just up by your belly button. And sometimes when women have cramps, they'll feel it up higher because it is referring into the digestive system a lot.
Yes.
But yes, that is one of the ways to stimulate the circulation in that area is important too. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment when I talk about for women who are getting in their years, that are starting to be in their 40s, how to help them or how to think about it. But one other common problem that women have with fertility is being overweight and being obese. And that's a big problem in terms of your metabolism, and also just physically the blockage kind of can occur internally, both to become pregnant, but also to give birth. Sometimes it can cause blockages. And there are also, because of the risks of being obese, are kind of up leveled during pregnancy, because pregnancy puts a lot of stress on your body. Your body's working overtime when you're pregnant. So that's something that is best addressed, of course, before you do try to get pregnant if possible. Necessities for healthy conception. There's a real traditional ideas about that in Ayurveda. There's the ruta, or proper season, which is timing. There's kshetra, the ripe field or the womb. The ambu, which is considered the female ovum or water gush. And the bija, or male sperm or seed. So proper timing is important. And one of the things is that I'm happy to see now in today's world, a lot of young women in the United States, at least, I'm not sure in Europe probably as well, are very knowledgeable that there's a time when they're fertile. They know that they have a cycle of fertility, and they can track it with all their apps and all this and that. And when I was young, that wasn't around. We had to, just do it all by hand, keep a little chart and everything.
These apps are great now, and they can really track and be more in tune with your cycle. I think it's fantastic.
Yes, it's wonderful. So that's a part of it, that women realize you're only fertile for maybe at the most a week. Like that would be the outside amount of time that you're actually fertile every month. So if you don't try to get pregnant right around that time, then you're missing out. But like I said, now that most people know that, so it's good. That's a good thing about the modern knowledge coming through. The ripe field is, again, talking about that everything is healthy. The uterus, the fallopian tubes, the menstrual cycle, the vaginal area is healthy. There's no diseases that can affect the conception and developing baby. And one of the big things to understand that Ayurveda teaches us that's really useful is how important the downward energy of Apan Vayu is. That when Apan Vayu is healthy, everything will go well. But it is the Apan Vayu that helps the egg move properly to go and to implant and stay in the uterus. So to have a full-term baby, it also rules the development of the baby. And so getting the Apan to be imbalanced before conception is really useful. And of course, as soon as possible, because then that will influence the eggs that are being ripened and so forth. So getting that Apan is a really, really important aspect Ayurveda practitioners can help with. And so many people have bad habits that we all have learned over the years of, not going to the bathroom when we feel the need because this is too important, or
exactly holding urine, ignoring natural urges. Yes. And just to explain to people, if they're new to Ayurveda, that Apan Vayu is a subdosha of Vata, and it's responsible for the downward movement and even for birth itself, right, through the birth canal.
Exactly. It not only works with the development of the baby properly, but it does also have to do with the baby positioning itself properly before the birth, and then with the baby coming out, with the contractions, the labor, the movement.
It's amazing.
Which is so vata. Yeah. So it's very, very key. And, I teach all the Ayurveda students I'm teaching, how important it's important for the menstrual cycle. I mean, it's important for all these many, many things. And that it's important to always pay attention to that.
Exactly. And managing vata, especially in our society today, which is very vata aggravating, managing vata should be a priority for all of us, but particularly for those of you who are, thinking about becoming pregnant and in the preconception stage. It's so important because, as you said, it's responsible for the menstrual cycle. Vata is the queen of the doshas and controls the movement of pitta and kapha. So really important for all of us to be aware of that.
Yes. Thank you so much for explaining that. So the female seed or the egg, and we've talked about that, and the male seed is the sperm. So working with that, and there are a lot of techniques for rejuvenating the sperm as well. And since the sperm are produced more constantly, whereas the eggs, you have all your eggs at your birth, it's a lot easier to kind of cleanse the eggs, or the sperm, but at the same time, they can be damaged by bad actions on the part of mistaken actions on the part of the male before conception. So yes, that's the traditional kind of visualization of the process in terms of the egg and the sperm. And of course, the egg and the sperm each carry all the doshas, the vata, pitta, and kapha. They carry the ojas, tejas, and prana. And they have microforms of all the 7 dhatus. And so there's the 20, in Ayurveda, we talk about the 20 qualities and the 3 gunas, and those are represented by the 23 chromosomes that are in a full cell. So, yes, it's very fascinating how it all comes together, science and Ayurveda.
Taking a moment out to bring you a word from our sponsor, Mount Madonna Institute. The mission of Mount Madonna Institute is to educate and empower future health professionals. Their Level 1 Ayurvedic Health Counselor program is the perfect entry into professional Ayurvedic training, and it is the gateway to becoming an Ayurvedic yoga therapist. The Health Counselor training focuses on preventive and mind-body health care. If you're looking to study foundational concepts of Ayurveda without joining the full program, join the Foundations of Ayurveda, and you can receive $100 off this course if you register before December 31st using the discount code ELEMENTS22. See the show notes or visit mountmadonnainstitute.org for further details. And you mentioned ojas there being our prime reserve of immunity. And that's a very important thing to consider. And that's why you're recommending cleansing or panchakarma, because in the process of nutrition of the tissues, the ojas is like the refinement of that. It's the essence of the tissue nutrition. Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of ojas for conception and fertility? Please.
Yes. Well, the ojas is very important because in the body of the baby, the ojas is going to be brought to it. Some of this very special ojas quality is what they will get from conception. So what is in the egg and the sperm, the ojas kind of represented in that, is going to affect the baby's ojas, the baby's immune system and strength and resilience, which is, of course, important to everybody. One of the interesting things that once you're pregnant, that it's good to know is that if the ojas kind of will move between the mother and the baby as the baby is developing. But in the 8th month, a lot of the ojas can go to the baby. There's a lot of movement of ojas. And that is a critical time, because if the ojas moves to the mother at that time, and then for some reason the baby is born prematurely, it won't have that ojas. And so sometimes the mother might feel very tired at this time because the ojas is kind of going to the baby.
Very interesting.
And other times the baby might act very sleepy, like not move that much as it was. And that might be because the ojas is going to the mother.
Wow.
So in general, the priority then, like around the 8th month, I do recommend that women try not to work by the 8th month until the birth, because so that ojas can build up in her. She's not over exercising. She's eating ojas kind of foods, rich kinds of foods that will nourish the ojas, making sure her digestion is still good and so forth to digest that properly. And then that will help both her and the baby have plenty of ojas for the birth and afterwards. And that's very important to how our longevity for our whole life, what we're born with.
So this just even further makes an impression how important this preconception stage is, because it's not only for the health of you and your system and having good fertility and conception and good pregnancy, but also then your child's health and well-being throughout their life and their longevity.
Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing how much you can influence it. And when we talk about what the constitution of a baby is, when it's born, it's due to both the mother and the father, but there's a whole separate part of it that is due to the mother's pregnancy, like how she ate, how she acted, what her emotions were, and so forth. Her experiences during pregnancy all affect the baby for the rest of its life, for what is its constitution. So it is a big responsibility and also a big opportunity to create the healthiest possible person. And we all need that health to begin with, because this world is so full of things that are not healthy.
Absolutely. Definitely plenty of challenges. And it's such a great opportunity to bring yourself into balance and alignment. And also, I think going through a preconception phase with your partner is great too, because it really focuses you on what the plan is, on having those conversations and thinking about, the pregnancy and life with the baby and so on. So it really brings you into focus on that journey.
Yeah. And that is so important. In fact, some say that if the partners don't have a good relationship, it can affect the baby's heart development. So that's one of the teachings. So like I mentioned just now, that this effect of the outside world is very strong on fertility. Stress. We all hear about stress day and night, and we're all like, oh, I know. I'm trying not to be stressed. What can I do? I'm stressed out about being stressed. But the thing to remember is that stress alters the whole body's physiology. And when the stress hormones are activated, the reproductive and digestive functions are put on a lower priority, because we're ready to fight or flight.
Right.
And we're not meant to be stressed out all the time. That's just not how we evolved. Our ancestors lived for tens of thousands of years at least, in peaceful kind of, they had stresses that would happen. They had to fight an animal off, or they were hunting, or they, fell and hurt themselves or something. But in general, they didn't have this kind of stress we have by the overload of information that we are subjected to.
Yeah, we're designed for short-term stress, as you said, to fight or flight, and get out of the situation, but not for this long-term, day in, day out stress.
It has a very strong influence on our fertility. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one reason why fertility problems are so much around us now.
Absolutely.
What happens actually physiologically is the same kind of elements to make the hormones of fertility are the ones that make cortisol and adrenaline. So when our body needs a lot of cortisol and adrenaline because there's a lot of stress, it's not making as much of the other hormones. Mm. And so it's a very physical repurposing that happens.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things we can do, and there's lots of people talking about how to reduce stress. So, but you want some moderate and non-competitive exercise, because that will be more releasing than a competitive kind of situation will be more kind of stressful. So then, of course, another really simple and cost-effective way of dealing with stress is just breathing. Breathing techniques that yoga and Ayurveda, I especially recommend alternate nostril breathing that helps balance that force in us of the kind of yin and yang or relaxation and going forward kind of energy, which can be related to stress in some people. And then also deep belly breathing, which can help turn off the stress, So, for instance, when you come home from work, to just lie down on your back and maybe put something under your knees so your legs are relaxed and your lower back's relaxed. And put one hand on your chest and one on your belly. And then just take some nice deep breaths into your belly and then exhale it, just very naturally, not forcing it, breathing through your nose, because breathing through your nose is activating to the relaxation response, whereas breathing through your mouth activates more of the fight or flight type things, as well as breathing if you just breathe in the chest. So that's why we want to activate this belly breathing. And you can do that for several minutes, just laying and relaxing. You might listen to music that's relaxing, or think of a mantra, or whatever kind of thing clears your mind, so you can have a kind of a stress cleanse before you go on to your evening, before you make your dinner and eat, to let it go. And if you can do a quick one during the day, if you notice that you're getting hyped up, so you're getting into that stressful kind of energy, you can just take a break and just do that deep breathing, just sitting up, just do a couple of breaths and just nip it in the bud, so you can learn to notice when you're getting into that stress and kind of nip it right away, instead of let it build up, and then you have to try and do something huge to get rid of it. And then Ayurveda has some nice herbs, such as Brahmi and Shankapushpi, to help strengthen the nervous system. There's nutmeg, which you don't want to use a lot of, but just maybe at bedtime. It's a sedative, but too much will constipate, so you don't want to do too much. And way too much can make you hallucinate, I'm afraid.
Yes.
And not in a good way.
Just a tiny pinch is perfect.
A tiny pinch, yes. And then ashwagandha, which is very good for moderating stress in your body, reducing vata in general. And of course, it's good to always have an Ayurvedic practitioner. I know now there's a lot of things on the market. They've got ashwagandha, they've got all these herbs, turmeric, all these things. But some of these will not work for everyone, depending on your situation. So just because herbs are natural does not mean they're harmless, and they might not like hurt you or make you sick, but they could over time create an imbalance that will leave you open to becoming sick in different ways. So please check with someone before you use something drastically or just even always on a daily basis. So I promised I'd talk about the aging situation a little bit, because in our culture, a lot of women are waiting to have children. I mean, traditionally, women would often have children when they were like 17 or 19 years old, and now some women are waiting till they're 40 years old. And you know, some of those eggs have been around. Well, they've all been around a lot longer when you're 40 than when you're 19. They've had a chance to be exposed to toxins and so much other, you know, stress and so much. So they can be more vulnerable as you age. And so you want to do certain things. One of the things that happens with aging in general is that circulation becomes less full, especially in the pelvic area. So that's one of the things that I like the Maya abdominal therapy for. But it's also, you can do just self-massage of your abdomen and your hips and so forth can be very helpful. Another thing that can help the circulation in the lower part of the body is to do foot baths. One of my mind teachers really recommended to do that, and it would be really good for Vata people. It helps to open up the circulation all the way up into the pelvis.
Great. And what would you use in the water?
Well, traditionally, she said to use sea salt in the water, and you don't just put your feet in, but you feel on your feet. This is especially for people who have cold feet, because that shows your circulation isn't working that good. So you want to feel up along your calf. Where does it feel warm, and where does it start to feel cold? And you want the water to go up above to where a little past where it feels warm again, so that you open it all up. Another thing to stimulate the circulation in the pelvis is to do sitz baths or vaginal steams, which have another thing that has become more popular in the United States. It didn't, it was not known, but now it seems people are doing it, and I guess it was also common in Asian cultures that they did it, as well as the Mayan culture. And so that's another way. And with that, you can do different herbs. And of course, again, if you're very pitta and you have heavy periods, you don't want to do a vaginal steam.
Right. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that.
Those are some of the ways that circulation can be. And also the energy circulation can be stimulated, of course, by using the Ayurvedic marma point therapy. And besides just the abhyanga, the general abhyanga helps the circulation, and then maybe taking a warm bath after the abhyanga, and so forth. Those kind of things are very useful. Balancing the hormones. So one of the things is to look at balancing the doshas, because that will help to balance the hormones. And there are different herbs and so forth according to different things, like, again, vidari, which I mentioned is good also for the adrenals, or licorice root is very good for the adrenals to help nourish them, because while we don't want to have too much of adrenaline and cortisol, we want the adrenals to be strong because they're very important in many situations, but also for menopause. And looking ahead to that, having strong adrenals will help keep your body more in balance, because the adrenals will actually help to make some of the other estrogens that you get instead of when the ovaries have gone on vacation or retired for the most part. So in doing the alternate nostril breathing, I believe that's a way to also help balance your hormones, because it's very subtle, but it's balancing those same energies that the hormones deal with. So one of the things that I talk about for the mitochondrial strength, which we talked about, that can be a specific problem, but in general, that becomes more of a problem as we age, is to eat properly and not be eating constantly. It's actually shown that the mitochondria need to be renewed, just like everything else. And so they need to be eaten up by the immune system, the old ones and the new ones, so the new ones can be created and formed and strength can be built. So one of the ways to do that is through fasting. And that's been shown to help the body to go into this kind of autophagy that kills and gets rid of the dead and old cells and lets new cells. And that is supposed to help against aging in all ways, but also in the mitochondria itself, inside each cell, they also need to do that process. Two things have been considered helpful for the strength of the mitochondria. One is a supplement called CoQ10, and that is especially important if people have been taking any statin drugs. It interferes with the CoQ10, and that affects not just the heart, because they always say, oh, you should take that so your heart will be all right, but all your cells, all your mitochondria need that CoQ10. And then there's a herb from, I believe it's from Greece, it's called pycnogenol, that is also good for the mitochondria strength. Another thing that helps is called hormesis, which is when you give a little stress. So what it means is to be moderate, like moderately exercise, moderately heat your body, moderately cool your body, moderately eat. All these kind of moderate stresses of our body allows our body to get stronger, to resilient to stress, but it keeps us from being overstressed and overcome, so we become vata from the stress.
Exactly. So like fasting, a moderate little bit of putting the body in stress where you're not eating between meals so that you feel the real sign of hunger.
Exactly. That's wonderful. Vitex is a Western herb that's also helpful when the mitochondria or the luteal phase isn't long enough, and it can help balance the progesterone and the estrogen in the body. Wild yam is also good for progesterone if you need that, and sarsaparilla root. So those are traditional herbs that are used. So that's kind of talking about aging. Another thing is coming off hormonal birth control, because many women use that, unfortunately, because it is very impactful on your whole body to use hormones, because hormones go everywhere, and hormones do more. Like the list of things that estrogen does is like hundreds. I mean, I can't even remember them all because there's so many things that estrogen does in your body. So when you take pills that have estrogen in them, it's doing a lot of things besides just making you not get pregnant. So when women come off hormonal birth control, they often don't have normal cycles for a while, and it can take a while. It depends on how old she was when she started it and how much time she used it and what her androgen functioning was like when she started. So if you take birth control pills because you're having bad periods of some kind, then you might find that your periods are still bad because it doesn't cure anything.
Right.
It just covers it up. You're not really even having menstrual cycles. You're not ovulating all those months. Okay. And then some women have different responses to hormonal contraceptives. So it can take like a year for some women to get their periods back. So when a woman has been on this and I'm working with her, I'll always look at what was her period like before she started, because that might be a problem. I'll look at, of course, where she's at now, what her balance is of the doshas, and I'll really look at her liver and probably do at least liver cleansing, if not a whole panchakarma, and nourishing of the liver. And I use the herb Guduchi, which is pretty safe for everybody, and also in pregnancy if needed to help the liver, because it won't cause a big detox, but it kind of supports the liver to do its natural functions. So it's important to let your practitioners know you've been on this kind of birth control in the past, even if you haven't been for a while, so that they can take that into account. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Terra. It's a wealth of information. You can tell of your years of experience, and it's wonderful. And I appreciate you sharing all this information today. But as we finish up here, Terra, is there anything else that you wanted to share or final words for the listeners?
Well, I do have a lot of resources, many of them for free on my website, wisewomanhood.com. So that's a good place to go. I'm going to be teaching a seminar for Ayurveda students in the spring, and a class I'm really excited about, called The Wisdom Goddesses and Women's Power. And it's each class will learn and kind of imbibe the wisdom of one of the wisdom goddesses of the tantric tradition. And how they relate to the different phases of a woman's life and how she can be empowered by each phase of that time. And then because I also practice shamanic work, we'll go on a shamanic journey to seek counsel with each goddess, hopefully being able to learn from them in the upper worlds.
Wow, that sounds great. And all this information is available on your website, wisewomanhood.com.
Yes. And if people just want a book, I have a book that I've written. It's just a primer. It's a beginning book. It's useful even for people who are new to Ayurveda, because I have a little introductory chapter. It's called Ayurveda for the Childbearing Years.
Fantastic.
And that is available on Amazon. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Terra. It's so wonderful to have you share all this wisdom over your years of experience. And you've packed so much into this episode. I really appreciate you sharing with us. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Colette.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Terra, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned in this episode. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this wonderful wisdom from Ayurveda. And don't forget, I have that upcoming discounted group cleanse starting January 27th, and you'll find that link in the show notes along with all my other online services. If you haven't already subscribed or followed the podcast, please do so, and the new episodes will automatically download for you. And you can find me on social media under Elements Healing and Wellbeing on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.